Well, it's a pleasure to be here today to speak to you all about this topic I'm very passionate about. So quantum technology is a very disruptive technology where it does provide an advantage. It could be an astronomical advantage that simply couldn't be imagined with just classical technology. So with such a disruptive technology, it's very critical to be ready for its impact. And readiness has multiple stages. First, you have to understand the technology, what it's capable of, and how ready the technology is. Then you have to understand, well, what does it do that matters to me? How does it impact my organization or my products and so on? So that's a sort of the second level of quantum readiness and awareness. Then, of course, you have to come up with a plan. Firstly, to benefit from all the wonderful new capabilities, but also at the same time, so of course one wants to be ready to benefit from all the positive applications of these disruptive technologies. So you come up with a plan and then execute the plan. But even before, and most importantly, you must be ready to mitigate, understand and mitigate any of the threats implicit with this technology. And Canada is very blessed in this regard. I think the only one of its kind. We have a multi-sector not-for-profit called Quantum Safe Canada that brings together stakeholders from government, industry, academia to plot a course for Canada to be safe against quantum attacks, but also to emerge as commercial leaders in solutions to make our systems safe against quantum attacks. And Canada also recently launched an industry consortium for the quantum sector, and Canada also recently launched a consortium of quantum companies, including sensing, quantum computing, as well as quantum safe companies to help Canada go through these 4 stages of quantum readiness. I'll recap the basic equation of quantum risk management. So again, first and foremost, we have to mitigate the threat that quantum computers poses to our cyber systems. And what it does is, while I said earlier, we don't always know where it will have an impact. In fact, the biggest impacts are yet to be discovered. So it's really a matter of being ready for that. And again, since the impacts could be very swift and profound, it's really imperative that we're ready and have that kind of resilience and agility built in. One example, and one of the first examples where we realized what its impact would be, is that it would decimate the foundations of cryptography that we use today, in particular public key cryptography. And the previous speaker, Douglas Stevela, will have spoken about that and the great work going on in terms of preparing fixes to that problem. But there's still a long road ahead. And people for the last 25 years have asked, do I need to worry about it now, or can I put this off till tomorrow? And that really depends. And it depends on 3 parameters. First of all, how long does this information that you're protecting? You'll have to go through across all your different information assets and look at the systems protecting the confidentiality and integrity of that information and say, what's the shelf life of this information and that information and that information? So let's just take one. Let's say it's X years. X could be 10. And then ask yourself, how long will it take me to migrate the systems I use to protect X, to protect that information for X years, to tools that are resilient to quantum attacks? How long is that? Let's call that Y years. And again, in most cases, if it's a moderately complex system, it's 10 or more years. So you have Y years where you're stuck with the current quantum vulnerable methods. You're supposed to provide X years of confidentiality and integrity and so on. And Z is the collapse time. So in Z years, quantum computers will be available and will be able to compromise the confidentiality of that information you communicated at the end of those Y years. And if X plus Y is bigger than Z, you're too late. There will be losses, and we need to move quickly to mitigate, to reduce those losses. Now, if X plus Y is less than Z, we shouldn't be complacent. There's still time to properly migrate to quantum safe cryptography and avoid losses. Now, so what is Z, right? Because if it's 100 years away, most people can say, look, my X plus Y is much less than Z, and I have plenty of time. But I think the number of scenarios where X plus Y is less than Z is shrinking rapidly. The quantum computing industry is accelerating very rapidly. There's still a long way to go. I don't want to understate how much work still needs to be done to get a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, but we should also not understate how much progress has been achieved in the last 6, 12, 18 months. For the last several years, this no longer looks like a science experiment. This is a commercial product or something getting ready to be a commercial product. The first generation of quantum chips, commercial quantum chips, are already available for access through the internet. Right? So you have the established players who have invested enormous amounts of resources, have broad, talented teams building the platform and making it available to potential customers. You have a number of new players, startups, again, very well funded now, who are achieving amazing things on the technology side. In the last several weeks and months alone, I've heard of 3 new startups around the world, China, UK, Europe, credible startups, well-funded, getting off the ground to bring their approach to a large-scale quantum computer to the table. So it's accelerating very rapidly, very impressive achievement of milestones. US, Europe, Asia, tens of billions of dollars have been invested in China, both from the government and industry, to build quantum computers, right, and make them available. And then recently, even a new startup has been launched in China. So the hardware side, the industry side is moving very rapidly toward the goal of having quantum computers, obviously for the purpose of helping customers solve important problems, design new materials, design new drugs, and so on. And it's not just a hardware platform that's being developed, right? Because if it's just a hardware, you can't do much with the hardware alone, but there's already both the major players, independent software vendors, other companies are developing all the different elements of the software stack. So to take these hardware platforms and to be able to deploy them to solve important problems for industry and for users. There's incubators dedicated to quantum startups to find ways to create value using these quantum tools. Okay? So this is really moving quickly. As you see, very serious players want to be quantum ready. They do not want to be caught by surprise when they suddenly realize, wait a minute, this quantum algorithm, this new quantum algorithm will totally revolutionize our industry, and we're on the losing side of that disruption. So they want to be ready for that. Again, remember, we were very, very fortunate that one application I mentioned, in other words, breaking public key cryptography, we found out about it in 1994. Imagine if we found out about that after quantum computers had been deployed. It would have been an absolute devastation for our digital systems and our digital economy. Companies similarly don't want to be caught off guard with other disruptions to their sector. And if you think COVID-19 or anything else is slowing down this train, it's not. Countries all around the world are doubling down, Europe, US, UK, Asia, and elsewhere, for quantum computing, as well as large-scale quantum communication networks and other quantum technologies. So there's great momentum. Again, it's accelerating toward many of these quantum technologies and advantages, but including, very importantly, quantum computing, which has a profound impact on our cybersecurity. One of the biggest next milestone toward a cryptographically relevant quantum computer is the achievement of a fault-tolerant logical qubit, right? Ones that can be scaled into larger and larger systems. 1 to 4,000 qubits starts to threaten foundations of our cryptographic infrastructure. And IBM recently announced last few weeks its technology roadmap, which indicates achieving fault tolerance by 2023. And others are also achieving important milestones toward that objective. The important thing to note is when this milestone happens, if you're not 90% ready, you're not going to be able to do the rest in time, right? The time between having a few fault-tolerant qubits and scaling them to a cryptographically relevant computer, it's some small number of years. It's not immediate, but that doesn't leave us much more time to implement all those plans, those quantum readiness plans. So it's imperative that we're ready soon. So it's just that last minute of 10% or so of doing in order to make our cyber systems resilient to quantum attacks. And that's even ignoring information with long-term confidentiality needs, right? For those, that really already needed to be done. So what is Z, all things considered? Well, we don't know precisely, and we're not going to know precisely until it's really too late to do much about it. So we have to anticipate all the different scenarios with various likelihoods. My own personal estimates have been, since in 1996, I thought there was a 0% chance of this happening in 20 years. I think it's hard to credibly speculate beyond 20 years, so I try to keep my estimates at the 20-year mark. But that 20% likelihood went from 0 to 1 to 10%. Now I think it's 80% or so likely to happen within 20 years. Right? And very recently, I've updated my estimates. I believe it's about a 20% chance of happening within 10 years. It's about a 1% chance in 5 years. Right? So it's already starting to get too close for comfort, even in the short term. And you don't have to take just my word for it. The Global Risk Institute commissioned my team to survey 22 other thought leaders around the world with very relevant expertise. And these are not people who are in the business of, producing these estimates. So we really had to ask them very nicely, look, we really respect what you think. Would you mind sharing your opinions on these questions with us? And we've produced histograms of their opinions, their views of the relative likelihoods of quantum cryptanalysis in 5, 10, 15 years. And we produced a histogram of their results. And you'll see my own personal estimates are roughly in the middle third of these estimates. And we're going to, in the next few days, release the 2020 edition of the survey, where we doubled the number of people we interviewed, and we also asked them for estimates about this fault tolerance milestone I mentioned earlier. So what do we do about it? So at the technology level, we know what to do about it. We deploy so-called post-quantum cryptography, and the previous speaker will have spoken about that. But quantum also allows us to add new tools to the tool chest called quantum cryptography. And together, they'll allow us to build a cryptographic foundation that is stronger than was possible, that was believed to be possible before. And with quantum cryptography, it's important, these are all very long life cycles, right? We plan, we deploy these cryptographic foundations and then we use them for decades. And they might get upgraded and so on, but the basic framework we're stuck with for decades. So we have to go where the puck is going, not where it is. And where the puck is going includes the existence of a quantum internet, right? We will build, so physicists and engineers are going to build global quantum communication networks. We have the pieces of it, building blocks, small, metropolitan scale networks. We've done point-to-point satellite communication. It's just going to continue. They're not asking cryptographers to build it. They're going to build it. Our job as security specialists is to figure out how are we going to leverage this technology that is coming to better secure our digital systems and secure our digital economy and our safety, right? So that needs to be done now. We need to plan for it now so we can benefit from these new platforms as they continue to emerge. And, we have to now look at risk versus reward, risk versus convenience calculations. Again, keeping in mind these risks and convenience costs will change, right? QKD will become more available and less costly in the future, right? And over time, we'll have a different understanding, a better understanding of the risks of using just post-quantum versus using both QKD and post-quantum. Canada's pioneered quantum risk management. My team has posted its quantum risk assessment methodology. It's available for organizations to take it and use it alongside their conventional quantum risk management frameworks, such as the NIST cybersecurity framework or ISO frameworks and so on. These are some of the first steps of getting quantum ready. When you understand your vulnerabilities, you can come up with your plan and start focusing your attention on the most important aspects. Great work going on around the world in standardization. Again, Canada is a very strong partner in this important global effort. Some countries are already moving ahead and already planning post-quantum, very specific post-quantum algorithms to secure some of their most critical systems, where the X plus Y versus Z formula really dictates that they really need to start now. And we need to see more of this around the world, right? Ultimately, we have to deploy these solutions, and in some cases, that deployment needs to start sooner. And if you're not 100% sure about the algorithm, not a big deal. If you do it in an agile way, you can upgrade the algorithm later. But for now, let's use the best available quantum-resistant, quantum-safe algorithms to protect these most critical systems where we're especially concerned about quantum compromise later. Germany deserves a lot of credit. They're doing great work over there. I spoke at the launch of one of their really impressive programs. There's 7 projects in this program. And it's an example of one of the projects where you see they brought together scientists at universities, at research centers, vendors of IT, of security technology, and users of security technology to focus on these very specific sectors and use cases, such as secure IoT in cars and so on, and work together, right, to make sure they're going to be able to deliver quantum safe alternatives in due time. Again, very impressive framework they have there. And that's something I think we should look at emulating. In Canada, we have programs that sort of resemble these kind of collaborations, but are not at the level, not the right kind of investments to really truly address these problems in a way that both make these systems secure, but also have our domestic industry be leaders in providing the solutions. As much as possible, we want to use Canadian technology in protecting Canadian systems, just as folk in Germany want to use German companies to protect their systems, and so on. I think Canada really has from a technology and opportunity perspective, we are second to none. And this is an example of things we might try to mimic or maybe do in an alternative way, but I do see a gap in Canada presently in terms of getting the job done in specific critical sectors, industry sectors in Canada. With that, I think fair criticism aside, we do have to acknowledge Canada, I think, is second to none in terms of its overall quantum readiness. We have done a lot, both in government and industry, and I should say also, of course, academia, in creating opportunity for prosperity and security in the quantum era. So we have our Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, which is absolutely first-rate and globally respected for many things, including its position, its readiness, its awareness, understanding, and the activities it's done in terms of quantum readiness. I've already mentioned Quantum Safe Canada and Quantum Industry Canada. I borrowed these slides from a talk Bridget Walsh gave last year at Amazon headquarters. NRC leads the Quantum Security Technology Access Center, which drives a lot of important projects in order to position Canada to be secure in the quantum era and also emerge as a commercial leader. Government has supported 2 very important open source platforms, Open Quantum Safe, which a number of us founded several years ago, and Douglas Seville is doing a tremendous job of driving it. This is a global gem. It's respected and appreciated around the world for the important impact it's having in terms of preparing us to be safe against quantum attacks. An Open QKD network is somewhat of an equivalent for quantum cryptography. And our satellite effort in Canada is world-class and globally renowned. We were a bit slow to get it off the ground, no pun intended, because we really were the global leaders. Our friends in China moved more quickly and are doing great work. But I think Canada is very well positioned and on a very solid path to be among a very small group of global leaders at the sort of global grown-up table for quantum satellite science. So that's very exciting, a great asset for us in Canada, and industry is engaging with this as well. So this is really, I can't think of another country that can boast this breadth and depth of strength in terms of quantum safe cryptography. And again, continuing to give credit where credit's due, our friends at ICED, in collaboration with various industry leaders across Canada, started the Canadian Forum for Digital Infrastructure Resilience. It was conceived of in 2019. In March of this year, just as the COVID pandemic was starting to ramp up and really shut many things down, I was asked to lead one of the working groups on quantum readiness, quantum preparedness. And we've been, we definitely were keen to accept, and we've been working with partners in the Canadian. So our aim is, to produce very clear, guidelines, best practices for getting quantum ready. And we're working closely with partners in the financial sector Great work in collaboration with the Bank of Canada, and the Canadian banks have a Canadian Financial Institution Quantum Working Group. So together we're doing essentially a pilot to produce some best practices that make sense for the financial sector, and also share the general findings with the other critical infrastructures in Canada and help them get quantum ready as well. Furthermore, another very important player in the Canadian, for resilience, especially financial resilience in Canada, OSFI, it recently in its discussion paper had a section on quantum readiness and asked some very important questions to engage in discussion with the financial industry in Canada and to move towards quantum readiness, quantum resilience, both in the context of quantum computing, the more positive disruptions quantum computing might bring to the financial sector, as well as the disruption we know it's going to bring to the cyber foundations of our financial system. To wrap up, I do want to make an important point in that this quantum disruption sounds like a very negative thing. Like it's a nuisance that we're just going to have to deal with, unfortunately, in terms of cybersecurity. But in fact, I think it's the opposite. It was a blessing in disguise. If you look at the tools, we continually place more and more of our lives and our economy and our well-being and our security on a set of digital technologies, a rapidly expanding set of digital technologies. Many of the foundational pieces, such as the internet, right, were not designed for these purposes, right? They were not, when they were initially conceived and deployed, we weren't imagining IoT and that people would be able to control devices, and that our health and our financial institutions and so on would all depend so fundamentally on the security of these platforms. Of course, we've bolted security on later, and it works okay, but we all know it's certainly very vulnerable, and it's going to continue to get more vulnerable. It's a cat and mouse game in a sense, but we're creating more and more dependency on these platforms as well. We know our cyber systems are built on a foundation that is far from perfect. In hindsight, there's things we know we could do better, but it's hard to create a business case for rebuilding something that's already deployed. But then quantum comes along and says, look, you're going to have to do that because here's something that will decimate your current foundations, so you have to rebuild them. And if we do it proactively, we'll be able to build a much stronger foundation, a stronger one than we had, a stronger one than we would have had if the quantum threat hadn't forced us to do this redesign and rebuild. So I think we can choose to make the future much more secure and brighter than it otherwise would be. And we're all looking forward to working together to make that happen. So thank you very much for your attention, and don't hesitate to reach out to me if there's any questions you'd like to follow up on.